The twin moons of Velcara hung low and amber over the barracks when Ethan Cole first laid eyes on the armor of Commander Ra-Val. He'd been assigned to the Kale Warrior compound for 6 weeks, long enough to learn to bow when the warrior women walked past, short enough to still feel his heart slam against his ribs whenever he heard the thunder of their boots in the stone corridors. Ethan was a mechanical engineer from Brisbane, recruited by the Interplanetary Cultural Exchange Program to maintain foreign equipment. He hadn't expected foreign to mean quite this far from home. The armor stood on its ceremonial rack in the center of the polishing chamber, golden and enormous, etched with patterns that seemed to move when the torchlight shifted. Commander Ra-Val's personal set. He'd been briefed briefly: maintain it, polish it, do not touch the inner clasps without permission. What his briefing had failed to mention was that the commander herself would be present. She stood at the far end of the chamber, arms folded, watching him with those pale violet eyes that had unsettled him since his first day. Ra-Val was everything the other warriors were, and more. Taller, sharper, quieter. Where others laughed loudly and boasted in the mess hall, she simply watched. It unnerved him in ways he couldn't articulate. "You are the maintenance human," she said. Not a question. Ethan Cole. Yes. He managed a nod that was probably too stiff to be culturally appropriate. "I'll be careful with it." She said nothing else. She simply turned and pretended to study the wall carvings while he set up his kit, microfiber cloths, the specialist compound the exchange program provided for alien alloys, a small calibration tool for the articulated joints. He worked slowly, methodically. The golden plates were extraordinary up close, not just metal, but something layered, the surface almost organic in how it caught light. He buffed in gentle circles the way he'd been shown, moving from the shoulder guards to the chest piece, aware every moment of her presence behind him. It was when he reached the central sternum panel, a wide, curved plate etched with what he now knew was Ra-Val's battle lineage, that he felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. He pressed the cloth flat against the panel and drew it in a slow arc from left to right, the way all the polishing protocols required, a deliberate, thorough stroke. Ra-Val made a sound, barely audible, almost a gasp. He turned. Her violet eyes were wide, wider than he'd ever seen them. She stared at him with an expression that looked like shock wrapped inside something else entirely, something warm and terrible and final. Then she spoke a single word in Kale. He didn't know it. He'd never heard it before. The torchlight seemed to pulse. And slowly, with a formality that made his breath catch, Commander Ra-Val of the Kale Warrior clans stepped back, placed her closed fist over her heart, and bowed. "My husband," she said, in perfect, carefully learned standard, "you have chosen me." Ethan spent the better part of the next hour insisting it was a misunderstanding. He tried in standard, he tried in the 17 words of Kale he'd managed to absorb. He even drew a small diagram on his maintenance tablet trying to explain accidental, 2 objects colliding unintentionally, illustrated by a stick figure and what he hoped looked like a polishing cloth rather than a weapon. Ra-Val listened to all of it with an expression of patient, immovable calm. "The rite of the first stroke," she said when he finally ran out of words, "has been observed by our people for 4,000 years. A warrior's battle lineage panel may only be touched by one who intends to protect her life with their own. The armor reads intention, not accident." "But I'm an engineer. I wasn't intending anything except removing oxidation from a metal surface." "The armor does not know oxidation," she said simply. He was taken immediately before the sub-council, which turned out to mean 3 senior warriors who smelled of something like pine resin and looked at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to barely contained amusement. The eldest, a woman named Velsan, whose armor bore more battle etchings than the others combined, walked a slow circle around him as if evaluating livestock. "Small," she said. He functions well, Raphael said, and something in her tone made Velson raise a brow. Ethan's designated cultural liaison, a young Kale woman named Oru who had been assigned to help exchange personnel navigate customs, arrived breathless and wide-eyed. She took one look at the scene and pressed both hands over her mouth. "Oru," he said desperately, "please tell them this was an accident." Ethan," she dropped her hands. "It doesn't matter if it was an accident. You completed the stroke. The lineage panel glowed, didn't it?" He thought of the strange pulse of the torchlight. "I thought that was atmospheric." "It wasn't atmospheric." Oru looked genuinely sorry. "The right is in the founding compact. It predates even the warrior clans as they exist now. To dissolve it, you would need to petition the Grand Matriarch herself, and she has not granted a dissolution in over 600 years. "What happened to the last person who petitioned?" Oru hesitated. "He is remembered in a cautionary wall carving." Ethan sat down heavily on a stone bench. Raval crouched beside him, an unexpectedly graceful motion for someone wearing 60 pounds of ceremonial armor, and studied his face with that unnervingly direct gaze. "You are afraid," she said. "I'm extremely confused." These are often the same thing. Something that might have been amusement crossed her face. "I will not force the bond's obligations on you today, Ethan Cole, but the council must be satisfied. We will present as bonded until the situation is resolved." She stood. "Also, you polished the lineage panel exceptionally well. Thank you." He stared at the ceiling of the stone chamber for a long time after she left. Above him, carved into the rock, a small figure was preserved in eternal warning. It did look a bit like a man holding a polishing cloth. They moved him into her quarters that evening. It wasn't as dramatic as it sounded. The Kale bonded pair's suite was divided by a heavy curtain of woven iron fiber, with separate sleeping areas, separate bathing alcoves, and a shared central space that contained 2 chairs, a fire bowl, and a low table. Ethan arranged his engineering tablets on one side and tried to feel like this was simply unusual accommodation. Raval returned from a council session late when the amber moons had risen high. She pulled off her pauldrons and set them on their rack with practiced efficiency, unfastening the outer layers of armor one piece at a time. Ethan looked away pointedly and occupied himself reorganizing tools that didn't need reorganizing. "You don't have to look away," she said. "Kale warriors dress and undress in front of their units. It is not intimate." "It's a bit intimate in my culture," he said to the wall. He heard what sounded like suppressed laughter. They ate in cautious silence. She'd brought food from the mess, which was generous in a way he was starting to notice she operated, doing things without announcement, as if kindness were a practical matter. The meal was something like a dark-grained stew, with strips of something he chose not to identify too closely, and it was genuinely good. "How did you learn Standard?" he asked. "I was the first of my clan assigned to the exchange negotiations 4 years ago. I chose to learn the language so interpreters could not misrepresent us." Her eyes moved to his face briefly. "How did you end up on Velkera?" "My application said I was good with alien mechanical systems. I was mostly hoping for something interesting." He smiled despite himself. "Got it." She looked at him for a moment that stretched slightly past comfortable. It became routine with uncomfortable speed. He maintained her armor every 3rd morning. The other panels, carefully, with great attention paid to not accidentally completing any additional ancient rites. And she began answering his engineering questions about the armor's design. It was apparently not purely metal. There were living elements, she explained, responsive alloys cultivated from organisms native to Velkera's deep stone layers. The armor learned its wearer. "Does it learn other people?" he asked one morning, polishing cloth still in hand. She looked at him with an expression he was starting to read, the slight tension around her jaw that meant she was weighing words carefully. "It retained your touch," she said. "After the first stroke, the lineage panel changed." She paused. It added something. What? She stood and turned, lifting the back edge of the chest piece so he could see the sternum panel from the inside. There, among the etchings of battles and ancestor names, was something new, fine and still forming, like a scar becoming a pattern. It looked unmistakably like two shapes moving in the same direction. He set the cloth down very carefully. "That's me," he said. "The armor decided," she said, and her voice was quieter than usual. Outside, the amber moons began their slow exchange, one rising as one set, painting the chamber in alternating light, and neither of them spoke for a while, which was somehow not uncomfortable at all. The festival of the bonded fell 3 weeks after the accidental rite, as though the universe had arranged the calendar specifically to complicate Ethan's life. It was, Oru explained in a hushed voice on the morning of the event, the one night a year when bonded Kale pairs participated in the ceremony of presence, a public acknowledgement of the bond before the whole compound. It involved a shared meal, the formal exchange of protection vows, and, Oru added, eyes fixed firmly on the floor, a tradition of the bonded pair remaining in their quarters together until the second moon set. Until the... Ethan stopped. "How long is that?" "About 6 hours," Oru said. "It's a quiet tradition, very honored, very private." He spent the afternoon pretending to calibrate things that were already calibrated. Ra found him in the maintenance bay just before the festival began. She had dressed in her formal armor, the fully polished set, golden and impossibly imposing, and had done something different with her white-silver hair, pulled back in a way that showed the strong lines of her jaw and the 3 ritual marks behind her left ear. He registered all of this in about half a second and then focused on looking at the wall. "You're nervous again," she said. "I'm always nervous. I'm on an alien planet, having a fake marriage with a warrior who could end me with one hand." "The marriage is not fake," she said very calmly. "It is unintentional. There is a difference." He looked at her then, and something in her expression stopped him. It wasn't the commander's mask she wore in council sessions. It was something unguarded. "Val," he said carefully, is this situation difficult for you?" A long pause. Outside, the festival drums began. "In our tradition," she said, "a warrior chooses her bonded with great deliberation. They observe each other for seasons. They exchange armor tokens. There are tests." She looked at him steadily. "I did not have that. I was simply claimed. By a man who did not even know he was claiming." She tilted her head slightly. "And yet." "And yet?" he said softly. "And yet the armor added your shape to my lineage," she said. "The armor has not been wrong in 4,000 years." The ceremony was observed. They sat at the head table, ate the ritual meal, and Ethan managed the protection vows with Oru whispering the Kale phonetics in his earpiece. The senior warriors watched with varying degrees of scrutiny. Velson watched him specifically for the entire meal and then, at the end, gave him a nod that felt, somehow, like a verdict passed in his favor. Later, in the shared quarters, the iron fiber curtain drawn, the fire bowl lit low, they sat on opposite sides of the central table with cups of something warm and fermented. She told him about her first battle. He told her about the first machine he'd built that actually worked, a soil analysis unit that had made his university professor weep with relief. She laughed at that, a real one, unguarded, that transformed her face completely. He felt something in his chest shift with an almost audible click, not unlike, he thought distantly, a very well-made lock finding its key. They talked until the second moon set. It was, by a significant margin, the best 6 hours of his time on Velkera. When the light changed and the traditional period ended, neither of them moved to leave for quite some time. The appointment with the Grand Matriarch was granted on the 38th day. Ethan had requested it himself. through proper channels with a formal written petition in both standard and phonetic Kale that had taken him 2 weeks and 4 increasingly patient corrections from Oru to compose. Raval had said nothing when he filed it. She had simply looked at him with that unreadable expression and gone to morning training. The Grand Matriarch received him in a chamber so old the stone walls had gone smooth as skin. She was smaller than he'd expected, ancient still, with eyes that were nearly silver and an air of having watched several centuries accumulate with mild interest. She read his petition without expression. Then she looked at him. "You wish to dissolve the bond," she said. "I wanted to understand my options," he said, "fully, before—" He stopped. "Before what?" He looked at his hands. An engineer's hands, still faintly marked by the compound he used on the golden armor. He thought of the etching on the sternum panel, 2 shapes, moving in the same direction. He thought of the laugh that had transformed Raval's face. He thought of 6 hours talking in the firelight and not wanting them to end. "I've been thinking about what the armor decides," he said slowly, "and I think I'd like to understand the bond better, rather than dissolve it." He looked up. Is there a path that isn't about accident or obligation, where it's chosen?" The Grand Matriarch was quiet for a very long moment. "There is the rite of confirmation," she said at last. "It has not been performed in 200 years. It requires the bonded pair to each choose, fully, consciously, to honor what the armor initiated." She studied him. "It cannot be coerced. It cannot be performed under obligation. Both must come willingly." "What does it involve?" "You must polish the lineage panel together, both hands on the cloth." She paused, deliberately. He left the matriarch's chamber and went directly to the training ground where Raval was running combat drills with her unit. He stood at the edge of the yard. She saw him. She stopped. She crossed the yard toward him with that ground-eating stride, armor catching the afternoon light. "Well," she said. He told her about the rite of confirmation. He told her, honestly, what it meant, what it required, that she was under no obligation, that he understood if she wanted a genuine warrior for a bond rather than an engineer from Brisbane who had stumbled into her lineage with a polishing cloth. She was silent for a moment that went on long enough to be agonizing. Then she reached out and took his hand, not gently, not delicately, but the way she did everything, with full and deliberate intention, and held it. "I sparred with 11 candidates before I was given my command," she said. "I outlasted them all. I have never met anyone I wanted beside me in the dark hours." Her violet eyes held his. "Until now." He exhaled. "Okay," he said. "Okay, then let's go find the polishing cloth." They stood together before the armor in the soft light of the chamber, his hand over hers over the cloth, her lineage panel warm and faintly luminous beneath their touch, and drew one long, slow, deliberate arc across the gold. The etching changed again. The 2 shapes that had been moving in the same direction turned toward each other. The armor, as it had for 4,000 years, decided correctly. End.